Hello, and welcome to another in my series of interviews where I'm speaking to one of our many senior accredited UX researchers from around the world. I'm Paul Blunden, founder of UX247, and we help product owners, designers, and researchers deliver high-performing products and services. Anyway, let's not delay any longer, and let's meet my guest. Hello, Nikos, and thank you for giving up your time to speak with me today. Can I start by asking you to introduce yourself? What's your name and whereabouts are you located?
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. So I'm Nikos, and I'm based in Berlin, Germany.
Right, and I know you're not a native Berliner, so have you lived there long?
Well, so originally I come from Athens, Greece. I grew up there, and I came here to Berlin like 11 years ago.
Right, okay. And obviously, I gather you speak Greek. Do you speak any other languages other than English, obviously?
Well, so Greek and English somehow are native languages because my mother is from the States. I also speak some German, but unfortunately I'm not to a professional level, so I won't say that I'm using it, professionally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. So presumably you conduct research, though, in both Greek and English, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. And tell me, how did you get into research? What sort of led you here?
Yeah. So, well, coming from a classic design background, I always got fascinated about data and how design elements might actually impact the diverse audience behind, the service, the product, or whatever. And early in my career, during my studies at the university, I got involved in many projects, including research, and tried to target the audience, essentially early on with my design. Then I would say leaving aside research for some years, at some point I found myself again involved with design projects involving a lot of research in a professional setting at this time. I think it was medical projects at that point. And one thing led to another. And the last years, I'm basically undertaking UX research and UX management projects exclusively. Sorry.
Right. Excellent. And have you got a favorite methodology that you use?
Well, yeah, so that really depends, I would say. What I really enjoy is the process of preparing the research, choosing the right methodology, and planning the sessions. I think one of the main challenges you have with projects in research is identifying the right problem, the right research questions for the project. So I do not have I wouldn't say that I have a favorite research method, basically because I'm results driven, and I would say I choose the method based on the project needs, scope, and what helps us to ask the right questions. So that to a sense that's my favorite method. Although based on my personality, I'm quite keen on learning new things. So generative research is something that is most appealing to me in a sense of process and type of work. But at the end of the day, some of my dearest projects are in evaluative research and not in generative.
Right. Yes, it's an interesting split, isn't it? Most people seem to do a lot more evaluative than generative, but it's always the generative that's kind of a slight preference, I suppose, because it's a bit more creative and you get into the nitty gritty more.
Yeah, exactly. It's the way you learn new things and uncover the actual differences and value around research.
Yes, yeah, indeed. And what market sectors do you have experience in?
So I did work extensively with IoT devices and smart devices. I mean, but I also worked with manufacturing and e-commerce, some medical that I mentioned earlier. But most projects involve enterprises and new technology projects of well-established brands. So I would say lately is, digital transformation programs, essentially.
Right. So in a B2B context or sort of more employee use of technology?
I would say both. So IoT was mostly with a B2C context, but manufacturing was with B2B, medical, again, B2, both B2B and B2C. At the end of the day, the thing that I found exciting with the, well, not exciting, challenging with manufacturing, with the sectors, is that depending on the niche, depending on the sector, there is a variety of challenges that you will deal with for identifying the right participants and enabling a diverse panel of participants, which I think today is one of the main focuses that we need to look at because of inclusive design and accessibility.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's, doing research with B2B is tough anyway. And once you sort of cast the net wider and say, right, we want to be inclusive, I mean, that becomes must be a hell of a challenge.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm quite interested to ask, and I've been asking everybody I was speaking to about the maturity of the markets that they work in. Okay, I'm really interested to ask you, Nikos, not least because of the kind of work you do a lot of. I imagine the sort of maturity and the customer centricity of those kind of brands must vary quite a bit, does it?
Well, yeah, it does. Although, again, based on my experience, so I would totally avoid generalizing these type of things. Enterprises tend to be more technology driven. So in the sense of customer centricity, the brand somehow tends to look at the competition based on technology and not so much based on the needs of the customers. So sometimes they forget that the challenges that their customers face might differ from their technology they can offer at the given moment. Well, yeah, but again, that's not a rule and maybe an exception.
Right. Okay. So you do find some that are pretty customer centric then?
I think, and as the project evolves, again, because I'm lately involved more in digital transformation programs, I've seen that as the project or the program evolves, they find themselves dealing with a challenge early on. But again, at the end of the day, I think it depends on the maturity of the people and the team and how much you can advocate and champion around methods and diverse practices and actions that you can take to undertake this type of challenges.
Gotcha. Okay. And what do you think the greatest challenge is for brands and product directors when undertaking UX research?
Yeah, so that again depends a lot on the company. So many cases where the key was they will not see return on their investment, the standard ROI. Some fear that the work they've put into the project until today will not be justified by the customer. So basically, it's not working. Others have to justify the costs to their boss or to their boss's boss. I mean, sounds political, but I think it's a daily thing. And there are also some few, which in my experience, becoming fewer and fewer, where they don't have any experience with research in the past. And this is done basically because of a request from their director or manager, or their experience with research was limited, mostly because they are not getting actionable insights out of the project or process they follow. So I would say there is a lot of analysis paralysis also in this type of project, the digital transformation programs, which is a big challenge for researchers, especially young, junior researchers.
And when you say analysis paralysis, you mean the researchers get bogged down in it or the organization?
Well, both at the end. And that's why I think it's a challenge for both sides, not only on a program level, but also on a team level, because there is a misdirection on connecting the dots that we should always reinvestigate if the problem we are challenging, the actual research question or design concept we are doing, is the right one at the moment in time. So maybe it's my personal view, but it sounds that we should somehow do generative research at every stage, not because we want to uncover new insights, but also because we want to match and align the process and the question and so on.
That's really interesting. I think it is a misunderstood method in any case, and a lot of organizations don't even sort of go down that route. I think they're worried about what they might find. But that's a really interesting perspective about using it almost to just calibrate that we're still in the right place. Really interesting. Now, I wanted to ask you, Nikos, about maybe a flagship project that you've done that you could talk about. We've spoken before and you've shared a few things, so I'm really interested to hear what you've got to share.
Yeah, so a flagship project for me was working with a big manufacturing provider for their informational section for the online store. They were so there was an information section that was building aside from the online store, something like a helper tool. So the client was, I'm not able to say names, but I'm sure it's.
Sure.
So they wanted to basically create a platform that they were bring industry automation together to solution architects, engineers, clients, and would provide sufficient information for them to choose the most appropriate elements, methods, and approaches for the project at hand. Do consider that in manufacturing, a big challenge that both sides face, especially when we are talking about smaller companies and not big enterprises, is that every project is different. I think in our field it's the same essentially. You should always somehow take the project with, let's say, 50-60% as something new, even though there are many commonalities with previous projects or similar situations. So when they came into the agency, I was working with them, and they actually had like 10 different products and features, on the table. But the research, primarily was done with stakeholders and SMEs. So, and they didn't have any user research involved in that process. So when we actually involve the potential users and getting the discussions about, again, in a sense of participatory design, we found that most of the ideas were really out of context and basically designing for something that is brainstormed in a vacuum. And so, yeah, so we decided to have a series of participatory workshops with the engineers to uncover potential new features or existing, iterate on existing ideas on how to work for the potential users with that platform. and how we can differentiate in the areas of other relevant platforms. So for me, it was a revelation how much information it was missing from the product team at any level, at any point, and meaning level from a director or a management level to development. So when something is being discussed in a vacuum and users are not involved, I think it's a common, at least again in my experience, it's a common challenge that you will find yourself into.
Wow, that's really interesting. And there's a couple of things there that I think are really interesting points, because you talk about the fact it's new every time, sort of, for us. And I think research obviously attracts naturally curious people, generally speaking, but I think partly it is that newness every project, even on, I've watched thousands of sessions, and you see something new every time, even with user behavior. That's not uncommon at all. And then, yeah, that enterprise perspective, that's really interesting, actually.
Maybe a point to that will be that basically what we did after the second round of participatory workshops, I did manage to get involved the directors, the managers that were designing this brainstorming sessions in a vacuum to get actually into the research. I mean, when they had time, not to see a video, a recording of the research, but come in there. And it was a challenge for me in that project, was that I didn't actually expect them to interrupt the research. So I had to somehow train them also, in a short amount of time, to how to navigate the whole process, because their involvement with research was, well, not superficial before that, but was basically, in a management level, they just don't really care about these things. And they actually did come into the sessions, and they found there so many insights shared in the sessions, and they wanted to interrupt and say, like, yeah, tell me more about this, and tell me more about this. Can you explore more?
Yeah, interesting. And how did the research change the product?
So the research in that particular project actually became the whole driver for the program. So in a sense that we built research ops for the program and developed the position. Essentially, I developed the position to research ops, and having like from one researcher into the program for 5 products. We had 4 researchers at the end, at least at my end. The program still continues. 4 researchers to continue and essentially split to evaluative research and generative research. So generative research will essentially feed the program with new ideas and how to calibrate the focus of the whole program on a governance level.
Right. So it wasn't just about building a new thing, it was about building a capability within an organization to build better things.
I mean, yeah, it's digital transformation. Digital transformation in the coming days, I would say it's something that people tend to translate that with their own words. It's like IoT devices back in 2017 was something new. Smart devices, well, it's not though.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I do think people get a bit confused between sort of digital transformation and digital migration. Too much of the latter and not enough of the former quite often. But no, it doesn't sound like that with the project you're working on. And I wanted to ask you about the user behaviors that are unique to sort of the markets you work in, and that you'd recommend global brands pay attention to. I think that's particularly interesting around the enterprise area, because I guess, do you sort of cross markets really with that?
Yes, actually. So, I mean, if we take it by sector, no, I would start with Germany. So in Germany, something was for me it was a surprise, because in my home country, data is not something. It's not an idea to be so keen on having privacy and stuff like this. But in Germany, the safety of personal data and transparency of transactions is actually really important, and maybe more even than most of the countries that I've experienced with. And again, in comparison with my country, my home country, where this is non-existent, it's a big surprise for me. But
And when you say non-existent in your home market, you mean people sort of just hand over their data and don't worry about it, or?
well, there is like this common trade-off that you somehow familiarize yourself or put yourself in a position that yeah, well, they big companies have my data. I at the end, I cannot do anything about that. If I want to use the service, or if I want to participate in a consumer base or a government base service, I need to share this stuff. But in Germany, there is this thing of, well, if you want this, you need to tell me why, and you need to give a rationale, and really convince the need behind the transparency and data transaction.
Well, it's interesting. You're not the first person who's done research in Germany to tell me that. But the case is certainly strengthening that that's a really important thing to think about. Is there anything else you've observed?
So with IoT, I worked a lot with Portugal and Spain, and I found a lot of commonalities with Portugal and Spain, and Italy, with Greece, I would say. And somehow moving to it sounds ridiculous somehow, but northern countries like UK, Netherlands, Germany have more. The DACH region has their own identity. The East region, their own identity, and so on. So again, I would say I do treat the project as new. So even with the manufacturing product service we did, although it was a global platform, it was not based on a specific market. We did the test, started the test on the European market, but essentially it was a really global service, meaning Asia as well, and US, where there is again a lack of understanding in an enterprise level. What is the difference of localization, and what is the difference of translation, and not only in research but also in product or service usage. So essentially, it's something that I'm still uncovering myself. It's not something that I would say I'm a champion at, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting area. I mean, I think the translation localization thing is a problem everywhere. But I think the projects we've done with manufacturing, it seems to be even more acute to me, in that I suspect because the kind of English is the business language, we've run a number of projects where the manufacturer seems to believe everybody speaks English, and therefore we've had them where they haven't even translated the interface. And then you're running in all these sort of non-English markets, and people really struggle. It's a strange set of behaviors, I think.
True,
So,
true. But especially in that project was actually the surprise came to me because if you consider region not only on a language level and behavior, but also on a business level, you see that especially in manufacturing, there is different challenges when you create a manufacturing product line, let's say in central London, and just move the whole manufacturing, the production line in the outskirts of London, where you can actually optimize the transportation and stuff like this. But same challenges we face with research and design and delivering digital products at the end. There is no actual stages that you can follow to uncover these things, especially when the enterprises are somehow big ships are hard to maneuver and it's more challenging to essentially put new things to their table, even though they are obvious. It's just how it is, I guess.
yes, it would be nice if it was different, but anyway. And Nikos, what's maybe within work, but what beyond work is inspiring you at the moment?
Well, of course, any type of interesting conversation that I stumble upon, exciting projects, meeting new people, and I would say above all, basically because as a kid as well, it was I would never see myself in front of a screen so much. So anything that takes me away from the screen is actually exciting for me because it gives me the time to really think about stuff that help my creativity and process also regarding work. But you need to be away from this to do that, at least in my experience. I mean, for me, I need to be away.
That's a very refreshing perspective. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you, but I don't know that they've got the self-discipline to make it happen. So well done if you are. And final question for you, Nikos, what's your biggest learning since you've been involved in research?
So I mean, two biggest lessons that helped me not only at work but with people in my life was basically that people do not always have an answer for each question. So I do find really valuable to create the space and the time for them to explore the situation and enjoy the silence as well. It's similar to taking time off the screen. It's the needed time you everyone needs to take a breather and really take in the things that surrounds you, experience things more. And also, active listening and silence is something that is not covered, especially in research. I find that it's a struggle when you involve SMEs or stakeholders in the process. It's really a struggle to facilitate. So navigating these two things on a practice level, it's a lesson that I learn in every project, I would say.
Well, that's a lovely lesson to end on. And Nikos, thank you so much for spending the time to speak to me today. It's been really interesting, not least because I always enjoy talking to you, but I don't talk to many people who have such a strong enterprise sort of headspace and understanding. And so it's really great to get a completely different perspective on some of these themes. So thanks very much.
Thank you as well. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, how refreshing to have a completely different perspective from the enterprise space from Nikos. Some of the work he does is really fascinating, and I know the project was talking about, where he built the res ops and then established the capability. That's a really interesting kind of engagement that really tees an organization up to be more customer centric and deliver better products and services. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did. My name's Paul Blunden. I'm founder of UX247. And if you want to find out more about what we do, you can visit our website. That's UX247.com, or find me on LinkedIn and drop me a message there. I'm happy to have a chat. And of course, subscribe to this channel and there'll be another interview coming along shortly. Thanks very much for watching.